MrBallen has one of the most successful storytelling YouTube channels on the planet. He is one of the internet's best storytellers. If you are not familiar, MrBallen is the YouTube channel for storyteller John Allen, which has almost 10 million subscribers. And they listen every week to his stories of the strange, dark, and mysterious. So if you know Mr. Ballen's stories and you've ever been curious, how he built this empire that is Ballin Studios just based on telling stories that he loves to tell and building a community of others who love to hear those stories. If you want to understand how he did that by just starting off in his basement, just looking at the camera and telling these stories that he loved, you are in luck because that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. Welcome to the Storytelling Lab, where we break down the art and science of storytelling. My name is Bennett. I'm your host, and I'm a filmmaker and an author on a quest to understand how we can tell better stories so that we can do better work and make the world a better place. Each episode, I host one of the world's best storytellers to help you understand how to leverage storytelling to increase your sales, deepen your connections, and serve your audiences better. What's up, storytellers? Welcome back to the Storytelling Lab podcast. This is episode 172, and it's a special one because last week I got a VIP invitation to see MrBallen, aka John Allen's first live storytelling tour. Now, they came to New York. I don't live there anymore. They came to Durham, North Carolina, where I live now and have lived for like 5 years, Rain. Come on. And I was super duper excited. If you are a longtime listener to the Storytelling Lab, you may remember episode 133, I believe. It's about a year or so ago, maybe more, that I hosted Nicholas Witters, who is the manager and CEO of MrBallen and Ballen Studios, all things Ballen Studios, which is now Ballen Management and Ballen Foundation, and a whole storytelling empire, which is so impressive, so incredible, especially for any of us in the storytelling space who want to tell our own stories. So Nick and I became friends. I always established good connections on the show, but he is one of those that it transferred out into the real world, and I'm so grateful for him in my life. And we chat over email every now and then, and he sent a gift after being on the show, and we've just kept that connection alive, and we chat every now and then. And so when I saw they were coming to Durham, I was like, oh my God, Nick, dude, this is my town, man. We got to meet up. We had never met in person. So we did just that. He gave me a ticket. I was able to get in early to the meet and greet and met John. Side note, this was all very cool. Went up to meet him, get a picture, and chat with him for a moment. And the first thing that he said before we dapped it up, a dap, by the way, which had the most beautiful sound and echo through the historic halls of the Carolina Theater in Durham, North Carolina. But he looked at me and said, Rain, nice to meet you finally. I've seen you on YouTube. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I've seen you on YouTube. So that was pretty cool. Super great guy. Couldn't be prouder of John and Nick and the whole Ballen team. And so I got to chat with him, get his graphic novel and talk. But most importantly, I got to watch this live storytelling show where he tells these stories that he's told on YouTube for years now, starting off in his basement many years ago. And now that have gone all around the world and helped garner millions of followers. And he did it on stage. This was a dream of his. And they did, I don't want to misquote, but several cities, maybe 15 to 20 cities that they did across the country, and he said they'll be coming back. Now, what I noticed by seeing him live, this is the best immersive experience to experience stories, and he says that on stage as well. Is like this, we make videos, we put it out to the ether, we can see that there's data that people are watching it and comments that they like it, but when you're in the room with someone, it's this real collaboration. You can feel the responses, the gasps, for the scary parts, or the laughs for the funny parts, etc. So I totally agree with him on that. And it was great to see him in this element. Now, let's get to the point of the show, which is how does he build tension so well? That is something that is very clear. Now, if you're telling stories of the strange, dark, and mysterious, it makes sense. You're going to want to build tension. But tension is the driving force behind any good story. Conflict, stakes, i.e., tension. You have to keep that tension going the whole time. And it is this ebb and flow of increasing the tension and then pop, just a little bubble, popping that bubble to release the tension, increase the tension, release the tension. That is the ebb and flow. That is the rhythm of storytelling, my friends. Now, let's talk about how he does this so well. There are three main ways that I identified from watching him on stage in his element. The first one, hands down, is pacing. He takes his time. In a world where everyone, including myself with my book here, 6-Second Stories, right? Everyone is telling you how to tell stories faster. You got to tell them faster. You got to get in there faster, 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 faster. We don't have the attention span of a goldfish. Yada, 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 yada. John goes completely against the grain. MrBallen's stories are slow, intentionally so. He milks it for all it's worth. Here's the thing. The point is just to keep people's attention. You can do that in long form and you can do that in short form. But the only way to achieve that is not just by rushing through the story so that they don't have time to go away, but to build the story in a way where they don't want to go away. That's what we're looking to do. And that is how you build tension. That is how you use sequencing in stories. And we're going to talk about the rest of the tools and devices that he uses too. But it's not about the length. It's about keeping them engaged. If he veered off completely, and he goes on a lot of tangents, but they're all keeping people on the edge of their seats and helping tell the story more effectively. So that's the point. But I love that he slows it down because it still has the same effect where you're waiting on the metaphoric and literal edge of your seat to hear what he's talking about. He takes his time. I mean, a lot of his YouTube videos are 30 minutes, etc. The first story that he told, which was a personal story, I believe he titles it The Night That Still Haunts Me. And it was when he was in maybe his teenage years, maybe early 20s, with a couple of friends of his in a cabin that his friend's parents owned, just after his friend's father, who owns the cabin, passed away. And it was incredible. It was almost an hour. It was the first story of what was supposed to be a 2-hour event. And I believe it was, if I clocked it correctly, about 50 minutes. Because I was like, when is the intermission if this is a 2-hour show? And is he just going to tell two stories? The other ones weren't that long. The point is, it was incredible. Might have been the best story of the night. Maybe so because it was a personal story. So that makes it a little bit, deeper. It's not about this third party, but he takes his time. Now, I do not subscribe to the philosophy that our attention spans are at the length of a goldfish or less. In fact, I don't want to get into the nuances and the details, but I think that was a misread or misinterpreted study that people are parroting all around. You see it all the time in communication experts. It's that we have too much attention for that, or too much demand for that attention, rather, right? We have too much competition for that attention. So we will tune things out and move on to the next thing if we realize that we don't care about this. But we binge watch 10-hour limited series or 3-hour podcast, right? We will sit down for a 30-minute YouTube video, or especially a live story being told, if it's good enough. So the pacing forces people to sit there, and it slowly builds tension until it comes to this fever pitch. That is intentionally done by John, and I loved it because instead of it being this like fast, mainlining your hormones and your neurochemicals, right, and stimulating you that way, it's a slow build. So the payoff is much better because it's been building within you this whole time. All right. So the pace is the first thing that he does that causes that tension to build as he's going through his story. Secondly, his descriptions, his vivid imagery. Now, when he's taking his time and telling these stories, keeping the pace slow, he's doing that not just by, letting there be dead air and dead space. He's doing that by filling in details that you maybe don't quote unquote need, but they absolutely add to the texture of the story. Now, I have a concept, I didn't invent it, called painting the scene, which is just like, it's not enough to show what the character is doing, but to set the setting, to set the scene in a way that establishes the mood and the tone. I remember shooting something very briefly when I was explaining this concept to someone in New York. I was doing an urban fitness piece and it was for social media. So it was very short, like 60 seconds. And so it was some dude doing crazy pull-ups on the street lights, right? But I started shooting what was going on behind him. Like, I started turning my body away from him, and I remember someone asked me, like, why are you shooting all that stuff? Well, I'm in New York. I'm shooting the taxi cabs flying by. I'm shooting, people walking and bumping into each other and the scaffolding, and you know, I'm shooting New York, right? This is so important to establish that layer of what the video is about. It's not just about the character and what they are doing or this person doing pull-ups. It's about the whole scene. How do all of those elements play together? So I was like, yeah, I'm just painting the scene. I'm kind of establishing that we're in New York and this is a New York streetlight, which is not like a Tucson streetlight, right? It's important. It's important to the story. So he milks it. He takes his time, and he does so by giving you the most minute details of the corner of a table, of exactly in the night that still haunts me. He talks about every aspect of the layout of the house. Now, I'll spoil it a little bit. There was footsteps that were coming through the house, and he couldn't identify what it was. I'll give you that much. So he establishes the layout of the house, tells you exactly where this sound comes from, exactly where the footsteps are happening. And he has already established all the details. I mean, he explains and even paused at one point. He was like, he's like, trust me, this is important. And if you're not familiar with my storytelling style, this is important to understand. I mean, he explains exactly the blueprint of the house. He is that detailed. His vivid imagery, the way he uses, and this is such a key for storytelling, so take notes here, sensory details. Anything that spikes your senses or plays to your senses through your brain, right? Because we know what happens. You touch something and it's hot. Well, your finger doesn't know it's hot. Your brain knows it's hot, right? There's a whole messaging system that happens super duper fast that sends a message from your finger to your brain that says, that's hot. And then you refer that message back to your finger, which says, hey, there's pain involved, et cetera, right? This is all neurological. So that's important to know, because when you're describing things in a certain way, we, the audience, can kind of feel them. We can kind of taste them. We can kind of hear them, because that's happening neurologically. So when you experience things like the hair standing up on the back of your neck or your goosebumps or whatever, that's your body having a real visceral reaction to something it's hearing. It's not actually happening to you, right? This is happening in your brain. So if you describe something like, you know, and I stood there staring, and just one single tear rolled slowly down my cheek. People feel that tear on their cheek, right? Even if it's just a fraction of what it would really feel like, even if it's 1 to 10%, they still can have that feeling, right? So when you use descriptive sensory imagery like that, it locks everybody's whole brain into the story. They are immersed. They are part of their story. There's a concept, a term called narrative transportation, where they are transported into the story, where their body and their brains are reacting as if they are the character in the story. That's why it's so good. Now, this story that he told, the story that still haunts me, talk about transporting into the story. You are him, that whole story, because of all of this, because of the detail in which he describes every little thing that's happening and how he feels and what it does to him. And you are him in that moment. And that's why that tension is building, and he's taking his time and doing it slowly. So almost so much so that it's painful. It's excruciating. You're like, oh my God, please tell me what's going to happen. This is why. This is why he is so good at building the tension. And the last thing that I noticed, which you will notice, all three of these things are tied together. He gives you all this imagery, and that's what takes his time. But he teases you. He dangles this little carrot of releasing that tension he is building in front of you the whole time. And just as you're about to reach it, he pulls it a little bit further away. And it is so frustrating, but also so addictive that you're like, damn it. And then you still keep going because you still want to get that carrot. And what I mean by that is he uses repetition. So he goes through all of these details, taking his time explaining to you exactly the whole blueprint layout, the whole floor plan layout of the cabin. Way too many details, right? But for a reason, intentionally, on purpose. And he'll do that for you, and he'll establish that, oh, I heard a sound, a pot or pan dropped in the kitchen. Now you know where the kitchen is. And I heard the footsteps come up from the front porch into the door. You understand where that is. And then they hit the middle of the living room, and you know where that is. And then they turn. I could feel them. I couldn't see it, but I could feel it, and you're locked in. So he'll paint all that picture for you in great detail. And then as those footsteps get to the door, for example, he didn't literally do this. This is just an example of what it felt like with his repetition. He would get to that door where you're ready to find out, what is this thing? What are these footsteps coming from? And he will go back and he will repeat the whole thing, not the whole thing in the same length of time, but he would be like, remember, here's the kitchen. Here's the thing. The table's over here. The pot that fell was blah, blah, blah. He'll go back and he'll repeat these things that he has already established. Okay. To a lot of people, that would be annoying. And it might be, but in the most satisfying way, because you're like, please just tell me what's happening. And he's like, no, no, nope. Just when you thought I was going to give it to you. And I've been taking my sweet time with all of my sweet details. Just when you thought he was going to give it to you, he pulls it back again. I mean, if you aren't craving, if your dopamine isn't shooting out of your skull at that point, then you are not human. He has complete control over you. And I know he's perfected this and gotten better at it over time. He has complete control over you, that he's like a puppeteer. He can play with you a little bit. Now, he won't do it so much that he loses you. He rides that line perfectly. He pulls it away from you. And if you pulled it too far away from you, you might just be like, you know what, I'm done, and scroll on out. He tees it back up, and he teases you back in. He pulls you back in, and eventually he delivers it. But I just noticed that. I was like, this guy, he keeps doing this tactic. He keeps using this device where he is repeating himself. And all of that comes back to taking his sweet time and telling you one story in 50 minutes that could have been told in 5 minutes. 50 minutes, 10 times the length. And it did not disappoint, not in the least. In fact, it was much better because of that. Because for 45 minutes or 40 of those 50 minutes, you're freaking out. You are freaking out, wondering what is going on here, right? So good. All of that going against the grain of what people tell you. Heck, in my book right behind me, I say cut out anytime you're effectively repeating yourself. This just goes to show you that there's not one way to tell stories. And as long as you are intentional about how you are telling stories and, wait for it, why you are choosing to tell them in that manner, and as long as they are serving the story, which is to do it more effectively, which means to engage and connect with your audience deeper, to have that latch, to have that connection stronger and locked down. That is what you're trying to do. It doesn't matter how you do it. If you do it by being silly and being fast paced because they have to listen, intensely to catch all your words, cool, great. If you do it by going slow as Southern molasses so that they are stuck in it, just like they're trying to walk through those sticky molasses, perfect. Great. However you can do it, do it. There are a million different ways. Do not listen to these people, anybody. Don't even listen to me telling you exactly how you have to tell stories. All you need to do is understand that it is a con- constant ebb and flow of tension. You're increasing the tension and you're releasing the tension. Being conscious of how you are keeping people engaged. Keep dangling that carrot. That's all storytelling is cause and effect. One thing leads to another. And if you think about somebody chasing that carrot, why are they going to keep going from 1 minute to the next? If you can answer that question, then you are a great storyteller. And it doesn't matter if you go fast or slow. Tension, my friends. Tension is what you are looking to do. Now, John Allen, aka MrBallen, who's been telling stories on YouTube for years, decided to go out and do a live tour. And he will come back. He already said that. I just want to take a moment before I end today and say how impressive that is. That this man said, I really love these strange, dark, and mysterious stories myself. And, and he was in a rough time in his life, and he committed to showing up for a year. And his family was dedicated in supporting that, right? This says a lot about the support of the people around us. And just said, I just want to start telling stories, and started doing it in his basement, putting them on YouTube. If that is not an inspirational story for you to follow, I don't know what is. You have to understand the stories that you need to tell, that you have to get out of your head and out of your heart, whether they're your stories or they're stories that already exist, true stories of the strange, dark, and mysterious. It doesn't matter. The stories that you want to get out of your heart and out of your head to the public, you can do that. You can build a career. You can build a business. Heck, you can build an empire just by being yourself. You do not have to do things the way people are telling you to do them. You just have to be passionate, and you have to understand what people want to hear and connect with them in a deep way. And today we talked about one of those deep ways, which is to ride that line of tension as far as you can. Check out Mr. Ballen stories if you are not familiar with them, and stay tuned for his tour next year. See you next time on the Storytelling Lab. My name is Bennett. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed that episode, do us a favor and subscribe to the podcast. If you're already a subscriber and you're enjoying the show, give us a review and let us know the value that you've gotten from it. We love to hear from our listeners and learn about the benefits that they're getting from the show. That's what fuels us, and that's what fuels the show. And if you've already subscribed and you've already reviewed it and you think there's someone else that would benefit from listening to this show, please share it with them. The more we grow, the more we can help you grow, and that's what we're here to do. Join us next time on the Storytelling Lab. This podcast is a 6 Second Stories production. 6 Second Stories is a story coaching and consulting company that builds online education, in-person and virtual training, and digital products that help businesses master storytelling to find their ideal customers and market to them effectively. You can learn more at 6secondstories.com and purchase the book 6 Second Stories at Amazon, barnesandnoble.com, or rainbennett.com/6secondstories.